Hey, welcome to the X Podcast. We are so excited to have you with us today, wherever you're tuning in from, whether you're live on Facebook right now or you're watching this on YouTube at a later time or whatever podcast app that you use. Hey, we're excited. Welcome to the X Podcast. Today, I've got a couple close friends with me who are both leaders, incredibly influential men in our city that I want to just welcome. I have Keith Minier here from Grace Fellowship Church. Glad to have you, man.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you letting me be here.
Yeah, and I have Matthew Johnson from the Tree Church in Lancaster, Ohio, one of my real good friends in life and ministry.
Yeah, man. Feels like deja vu. We did something yesterday together,
yeah, we did. So we're back together again. Well, today I got a special treat for everyone. We wanted to talk a little bit about leadership, and I thought no better group of guys than to get some of the best leaders that I know to come sit around the table with me today. And we wanted to talk specifically about leading through a pandemic. And though you may not be a pastor of a ministry, but if you are in any type of leadership role, and I think many of us are, even as parents, that we're leaders at home, that we wanted to kind of talk about what it's been like for us to lead through a pandemic like this, or this year. 2020 has been a crazy year. I don't think I can think of another year that's been this crazy since I've been alive. How about you guys?
No.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, nothing even close.
Yeah.
9/11, that was a really dramatic season, but it didn't impact in the sense that it didn't divide. It felt more unifying than anything. So this season has been unreal because I think it's been so divisive. So I don't have anything to compare it to.
I also think the length of it, a lot of times when things have happened in the past, it felt like they showed up, they blew up, you dealt with it. And what's going on, particularly with COVID, just it feels like we're in a marathon with no end.
Never going to end.
Right,
yeah.
That's what it's felt like. And so I know for myself, I'm sure you guys, it's been intensely challenging to lead through this. And I remember when it hit in March, that's kind of when it really started to hit. And I think we all kind of, within a week of each other, if not maybe the same weekend, kind of closed down our in-gathering things. I don't know if it was the same weekend, but it might have been. Did you guys go one longer? I can't remember.
No, I think we were one of the first ones.
I think we were, but I'm just kidding. This is what we do. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I remember
think it was
when we
weekend.
were texting, because all of us were like, are we really doing this?
Yeah.
Are we going to shut down? And then, I mean, we even joked about it, because in my video to our church, I said, this might last 2 weeks. And I remember in our text, we're like, all right, we'll do our part. We'll shut down for 1 or 2 weeks, and we'll pivot and go online. Had no idea that it would be months before we were back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting even to go back sometimes and whether it's a video you shot for the church or part of a sermon that you preached where your frame of reference was, this is just going to last a little bit of time. We'll be back to normal.
Yeah.
And all of us were obviously scrambling, asking each other people we knew, other people in ministry, what are we doing? And then everyone sort of realized this is gonna last.
Yeah.
This is gonna go on a while.
Yeah.
Did you guys feel ill-prepared to lead through this? Or was it easy?
I would say yes and no. Here's what, none of us were prepared for a pandemic. We've never walked through this. We did not have a strong online presence, so we had to pivot quickly for that. So Here's what I'd say. We were not prepared. We had no idea what was coming. Where we were prepared is, I think all of our churches can agree on this, we have incredible staff.
Yeah.
And they really worked hard and quickly to produce really solid ministry. So we were prepared in that we had systems, but I still don't feel prepared because we don't know when this is going to end.
Yeah.
So there's so much mystery to it. We've actually had to keep pivoting how we lead because there are times we'll make a decision on Monday and change it on Tuesday.
Wow.
Because you just don't know. Like we were talking about before we went live, when the press conferences happen, that's when you have to make decisions. So sometimes, and in the church world, Thursday is kind of like the end of our week as we're getting ready for the weekend. And so when the governor comes out on Thursday and says something, you're like, okay, now that changes everything.
Yeah.
But for us, we don't have office hours on Friday or Saturday, but a lot of our staff is still working then.
Yeah, and it's even a larger challenge for us. We have Thursday night service at one of our campuses.
Oh, yeah.
So we're reacting in real time to that and how that's going to carry the day for the rest of the weekend. In one sense, pragmatically, there was no preparation I think any of us could have done in any way to know the real nuts and bolts of how to lead through this and what what decisions you're going to have to make and how you're going to make and how it's going to affect your church, and then all the dominoes that followed from the length of time being away and division. On a positive sense, I think to Matt's point, if you had a great team and you were personally, spiritually healthy, I think you had a chance to really get out of the gate and go and do okay. And so I think I have really been encouraged by the leadership that's around myself and that's a part of our team and our team as a whole. And then just knowing that like our church was at a healthy place going into this. If we had been scrambling or struggling or not,
or building a new building,
if we hadn't been in a place, the kind of places we've been, I think it would have been really difficult. But you know, you and I have talked many times, all of us have, about the building you're building and the challenges that you've built and that we're sitting in and all that. But all of us have been in ministries that have been in an advancement, take ground mode, an expansion mode. Matt's not that long into his facility. We've built new facilities in the last few years. All of us had plans to keep going forward. And so all of us have been trying to figure out, like, what do we need to say no to right now? What are we saying no to or yes to in the future? But for you guys, I mean, it's been a real, obviously a real emotional challenge to open up a facility during this. And it's something that, you know, I've personally communicated to you and I've communicated to my team about that. We feel for you guys because nobody could have done this. You know, I was talking to a rather large church in the country that was about to launch a $100 million project within about a week of getting ready to shut down. And they, you know, pulled it off the table. And there's just story after story of churches and businesses that felt that. So in one sense, not prepared at all, but I think in another sense, and this is going to sound like what the pastors are supposed to say, but like, God is still God, the mission is still the mission, we're still supposed to do what we're supposed to do. How that has showed up on the day-to-day has been very difficult.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like it's been I feel like there was nothing that prepared us for it, but I will say, I think our years, because I've known you guys for a long time, and we've kind of been connected as a small group, that encouraging each other for years, and it's kind of cool because we've seen our churches all kind of develop over the years together. So I do think that my relationship with you guys was a big plus. That really helped. I think we were texting each other and I think just encouraging each other because we'd all get really down at times in this process. And I think just leading through something difficult, a lot of times you feel like you're the only one. I think it's been nice to be able to find some people and know that I'm not the only one that's struggling with what are we going to do. I remember we're literally looking at each other going, when are you going to, well, we're not opening until at least this. And
there's always the challenge of, I think one of the high costs of leadership is you have to make decisions you know things that other people don't know, whether it's about a staff member or a financial decision. And you have to go live in the isolation of like, I know I made this decision with all these facts and other people are never going to carry that. And that's exhausting. We also get a ton of benefits for the job that we have, and we get honored and celebrated, so it's not all bad. But I think the challenge with this is we're carrying a weight that I'm not sure other people who aren't lead pastors in a church world can feel. You know, you think about that list that the Apostle Paul goes through of all the things that he's been shipwrecked and he's been beaten, and at the end he says, and I feel the weight of the churches. And there is a unique weight that we feel, and we love our people. We don't want to be wrong. We want to get it right. Like, we're not trying to be stupid, you know? And so I think in all of this, to be able to look at a fisherman as a fellow fisherman and say, are you struggling? Is this hard? Are you tired? Do you have people mad at you? Has been helpful. And so I don't know what I would do without the people that are in ministry like you guys that I couldn't bounce ideas off or just say, hey, I'm tired, and encourage one another.
One of my favorite moments was actually, I think like a week or two ago, where we were all texting and we all were just sharing the crazy things people have said to us. And I jokingly said, like, Keith, you okay, buddy? You know, like I did one, he did one, you did 1, 2, 3, and then you did a few, and then did a few more. And it was just, but it was funny. It was like, I think it caused all of us just to kind of laugh and go like, we're all doing this together. And it's, again, none of us would ever exchange our jobs with anything else. We love what we do, but it is a uniquely challenging role. It just is.
I like one of the things that you said was you talked about the decisions that we've had to make. And I feel like this has been one of those years where there have been so many intense, feeling very significant decisions that we've had to make just throughout the entire year. I mean, it's not only like, hey, we're not going to gather together in person. How long is this going to last? When would we come back? How would we do it if it is safe? All of the things that come with that. And I know that whenever we sit in the seat we have to make decisions, and that there's fallout. Mm-hmm. There's fallout from every decision. What has been the impact? How has it personally affected you guys for the decisions that you've made, knowing this is what we've seen, as you said earlier, Matt, about how this has been such a divisive year. Mm-hmm. Knowing, I mean, I feel like right now, any decision that we make, I know that there is going to be a group of people who knows what percentage they're not going to like it. Right. And you'll hear about it. How has it been having to navigate really difficult decisions in this season?
Yeah, for me, this March will be my 10th year as the lead pastor. This was the hardest year for me mentally and emotionally. And again, so we joked about this yesterday, like this is going to be a little bit more raw than I probably would do normally.
Well, the good news is nobody from your church is listening. This is just our church and the people who are following in those. So that's the nice thing. We can be really honest, and you don't have to worry about anybody. This will not get back to anybody.
Conversation with three brothers.
This is it. Just us. So go ahead, say it. We want to hear it.
No, but so it was the first time that what was frustrating to me was leading up to that. If someone would have asked me about the church, I would have said, our church is really open to hard truth. I can get up and preach and proclaim hard truth, and they respond well. I really had that confidence. In this season, it was hard because it just felt like people didn't trust us and trust me specifically.
Yeah.
And when we had to not just make decisions about like shutting down our physical meetings, going online, and there was distrust with that. But then if we took biblical positions on things, people took it as we were taking political positions.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, no, this is what the scripture says. So in the past, they would have like gone, okay. And part of that, I want to, in their defense, part of that is there is a difference between teaching people hard truth on video versus in person. Like when we started going back, there were a lot of people that said like, okay, this is different. I missed this. So there was that dynamic. But for the first time, I'll be really honest, it was the first time in my entire ministry that I actually had insecurity at times about proclaiming truth because I just knew there was going to be fallout, like immediate fallout. I didn't compromise, so I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying like I didn't compromise, but I had that tension. And I was like, so whereas before I'm like, you know what, they're going to respond well, but like getting ready and preparing my notes and stuff, I was like, or posting something on social media, I'm like, I just knew I'm going to go preach this sermon and someone's going to quit our church. And that was emotionally hard for me.
Yeah, I've been a lead pastor for 16 years, and it's been not only the most unique, but the most draining season of ministry. And again, all of us would say it's a privilege. We're not, we're not looking for ways to get out of it. But I felt like one of the biggest challenges was the reality that I can think of people in our church that I've invested in for years.
Yes.
I've walked them through divorces.
Yes.
I've ministered to their kids. I've showed up in crisis. And then a singular decision was made or a statement was made, and all of the trust chips were just eradicated.
Yeah.
And I remember being in a meeting one time with the mayor of Columbus, and he said, every day I wake up knowing about 50% of the people don't like me before I say a word.
Yeah.
And there's been a sense where I've gone back to like, that's how I've felt about statements that we're going to make. You know, you're so brave for opening. Yeah. You're so stupid for opening.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You're so strategic for having an online ministry. Online ministry isn't real church. And, you said this about the racial tensions that existed. You must hate cops.
Yeah.
No, you must only care about people of color. And it felt very, very like, man, I don't know what to say. And that's not been a struggle historically to feel whether it's bold or permission. And it's just been a season where your words have to be measured very, very carefully. And yet they're going to be used against you because people think you have an agenda that you don't necessarily have. And so I think what I have felt is I've said to people in private, I've said publicly, like, just because I'm making a decision you don't like doesn't mean A, I'm not being courageous, and doesn't mean B, I don't love you. Like, you thought I was courageous and loved you before this. Why did I stop? I didn't
Right.
stop. There's just a different set of variables that are working at this.
What do you think? What do you guys think that it created that culture? Because something definitely feels different now.
Yeah,
And I don't know, is it just a virus? What shifted culturally where it did, like you said, it created this massive divide that whereas people then started to question your motives or almost your political beliefs or swinging, or it's like, where are you getting your information from? You're deceived, and how could you do, it's been crazy because I don't feel like we had that kind of culture before, at least in the way we interacted with our church, and I think it's different now. And I hope it goes back, but it's kind of worrisome that it's not.
I think a couple of things go into it, and crisis is an accelerant, right? Like crisis is going to make things that were already happening get worse. Mm-hmm. And there's a great book that I read at the beginning of the pandemic, The Coddling of the American Mind, that really talks through the idea of a bunch of things about our culture, but tribalism and how tribalism is being developed, us versus them. And this has just rapidly increased that. And so I think you had something that was already happening in our culture with talk radio, talk television, the political divide getting bigger, the way people see the world. I think you had that happening, and this put that on steroids. I think another reality is, man, it is so easy to condemn and be angry and yell at people that you don't ever have to see in person. The easiest people to be mean to are people you're never going to have to talk to. And suddenly we separated ourselves out, even from like, I passed you in the hallway at church, or I ran into you in the restroom or the cafe or whatever it is. And so I think people got a lot of courage from animosity, or from being anonymous. I didn't have to see you. Yeah. And so I think you have the separation of physical relationship. I think you have the accelerant of tribalism that was already happening. And then I think I don't mean this in a postmodern sense of like an assault on truth, you live your truth, but like we don't even agree upon the idea of facts and data anymore. Right. So you can't even look and go, this is what the science says about blank. And people are like, yeah, there's an agenda to how those numbers were created. Yeah. Yep. So like if we can't actually say a scale says what a scale says, we have nowhere to argue from and build consensus from. Right. I think all three of those have just contributed in a massive way.
Then we'll take it to the next level and then you remove meeting at church. And what we discovered is a lot of people did not have a discipline or maturity in their faith. So if they weren't going to church, they weren't even really engaging online. Like we saw initially, people were all like, we're on board, online. And it was like 3 or 4 weeks into it. We all talked about it. It just went, people were like, that's bored. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So you have the sin factor in our lives that if we're not connecting with God and being renewed really on a weekly basis, and because maybe the average Christian doesn't have a disciplined devotional life where they're praying and seeking God on a daily basis, Sunday was like that reset for them every single week. You remove that and everything he just said that was so true, and then now you remove the reset, and people just got darker and darker, and that's what we heard. I mean, literally the language. I'm not exaggerating. I had 3 or 4 meetings with people as we started to come back that said, I was in a dark place. Yeah, that was their phraseology. I was in a dark place. And one of our pastors, Michael, he said in one of our meetings, he goes, I don't think we understood how damaging this season was spiritually for people. Yeah. Because we as a staff were really seeking God because we're trying to still do ministry. So like this was odd. Like I was doing Bible studies every day online. I'm preaching. I might have been in some ways, like as close to God as I've ever been, because I was just I had to be, right? I'm constantly. So I wasn't even sensitive to the fact that when I'm seeking God and studying the Word, and then I make a post that people are reading that from a really spiritually dry place, an angry place, a divided place, and so they're frustrated, and it's basically like kick the dog. Like I'm not really mad at the dog, but he's at my foot, and I'm upset. I'm kicking him, and that's what I think happened with pastors and happened with other people, and it was just. I mean, the political climate was really so divisive, even with President Trump. And again, I probably shouldn't even address it, but like he brought into it a culture of he brought into it a culture where if someone says something or does something you don't like, you just attack it. Yeah, that's his rhythm. I mean, on Twitter, and there are a lot of people that embrace that as like this is the new norm. If I don't like it, I'm going to attack it. Yeah, and then Facebook just gives people confidence that they wouldn't normally. I mean, we all know that. That's not something new that we're
Yeah, I think
explaining.
social media obviously has created a different culture
Sure.
where everybody has an opinion. Everybody wants to make sure they let you know about their opinion. Whereas I think leadership before, you'd make decisions, but a lot of it's veiled. You don't necessarily, unless people get bold enough to actually go, we want to meet with you or we need to talk to you about it, and they don't. And I think it's been really hard knowing. I think this year it feels like, I think you said an accelerant. I feel like all of those things you guys said really built to where it feels like we got to the summer. And obviously with George Floyd, his death, and what happened in our country after that, all happening in a political year, which I know it just ramps everything up. It has felt like the most divisive time in human history in our churches. And I feel like trying to figure out how to lead through that, I don't want to take any side. I don't care. I don't want to go conservative, liberal. I don't want to go. I just want, we got into ministry. I want to help people. I want to help people find hope. You know what I mean? Like, these are the things that I want to be a part of. And yet it feels like we're getting pinned in corners. And, if you follow the mask mandate, then I got fear. Like
and that's the problem with the way that a lot of people are communicating is if you're for something, you have to be against something else.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case, because even like you said, you see it online. People are like, if you wear a mask, people are like, oh, you're a sheep. Like you're just following. And it's like, and going to your point, it doesn't matter. They don't even know the reason why, but you could be using facts. You can be using data and saying, I'm just making an educated decision. But if they don't agree with that data, then they dismiss it, and then now they're just making a character judgment on you. And this is the rhythm in our culture where people are just speaking without giving any type of grace to someone or trying to know the backstory. So like through this situation, I was just purposed, like someone would tell me, so-and-so is mad, like in our church. So I'm like, okay, I would call them. Hey, will you meet with me? Because that's kind of my personality. Like, let's just talk it through. And almost every single time it ended in a really positive way, but every single conversation, they were surprised by the information I was giving them from behind the scenes. So they were like, why did you guys ever close the doors? Because they're making the assumption we could have had church if we wanted. The reality is we couldn't. They don't, and I think you can speak to this too, like with your church. I think people made the assumption that because they felt a certain way, everybody agreed with them. The actual vocal group was the minority. The majority of people wanted to shut down in the sense that they thought it was the best thing to do. So like even when we decided to go back, it was really hard getting volunteers.
Yeah.
So we were working at a fraction of our volunteers. So if we wanted to stay open, we could not have had children's ministry. We just simply did not have enough children's workers for that. And so people made the assumption they knew all the facts, and they would come and they would sit down and I would say, no, this is the reality. And every single time they were like, oh, I didn't realize that. And I'm like, yeah, I understand that, but that's the grace you have to give leadership is to say, I'm assuming you know something that I don't know. And that's what Keith was talking to earlier. I'm assuming that you have more information than I do, but I think our culture has just quit giving that assumption.
Yeah, and I think you add to that you talked about how church being away from church affected them and people not having spiritual disciplines. We talk a lot on our team about people don't normally just decide to walk away from God. They drift away from God, and it's not a light switch, it's a dimmer switch. And so people slowly get further and further away from their faith, from the Word of God, from spiritual community, all those things. And then that affects the way they process life.
Yeah.
Add to that, they were hurting. They still are hurting.
Yeah.
Their lives are messed up, right? Like, we all have had to lament real things that were taken away from us, real things we wanted to enjoy, everything from funerals to where you couldn't go or interact with people to family members in nursing homes that you can't visit, to trips and everything. So you've got a spiritual drift, you've got real pain that people are experiencing, confusion, finances, fear, all these things. And then you just add to the fact that we sometimes don't act like, while the Bible and the following God is built on absolute pure truth, that absolute pure truth is nuanced in a way that it's and, not or. So Jesus says to the woman, I don't condemn you, but go and sin no more. It's grace and truth. And what has happened throughout this entire thing is people have sort of taken a camp on an or side and not wrestled with, no, I can still look at data, see things as real, and not be fearful that God's not sovereign and in control and that we're not going to move. Like those two things can exist at the same time. I can be very concerned about how people of color are communicating, and also believe that civil servants and cops do a great job most of the time, and I love them and support. And we've moved to this idea that, like when you were saying, Matt, to be for this means to be against that, and it's in your home. Is your home supposed to be a place of fun or a place of discipline? Yes. That's hard, right? And so there's some of this stuff where we're really wrestling with how do we grab hold of the and reality of things in a world where people are just they're putting their flags down in a camp of an or. And it's not that simple. There's challenge. Like we want to physically meet together. We also want to love our neighbor as ourselves. We also want to keep our testimony to unbelievers strong. All those put into the soup to figure out on how you meet, make a decision hard. And so all of those come together. And I think that we're lazy in our thinking a lot of times as people. We don't want to even understand the other side has a point.
Well, and I think too, we also found ourselves, really impacted by algorithms. We find ourselves like you just in conversations with people, even in church.
Of the own things
you know exactly where all of their videos are coming from, what all they're hearing. They're not actually diverse in what they're hearing. And so it just creates a singular focus and just a singular thought process instead of nuanced thought, instead of getting to a more critical level of thinking. What would you say?
No, and that was one thing that was sad to me as a pastor, was how many people, I would quote the scriptures and they would quote a blogger. You know what I mean? They would quote a YouTube channel and they would quote, whatever political side they were on. And I'm like, because they kept trying to, I think, try to say, like, you guys are taking a political stance. And I'm like, I'm not taking a political stance.
Right.
I'm taking a biblical stance. I'm trying to get you to understand a different side. And to Keith's point, I think people just, they continue to read and listen to the things they already agree with. And they're not opening their minds to be challenged that there's another perspective. And for me, I had to realize I was doing the same thing because I would read people's posts and immediately get frustrated with them because I didn't agree with them. And I realized I was doing the exact same thing that was annoying me that people were doing to me.
Yeah, we have our own biases that we have to come face to face with in all these decisions.
And so I would do this mental exercise of going, I would ask myself, why do they embrace that? Why does that bring them peace? So that I could understand them better, so that I could love them better. And that was honestly a pivotal moment for me in that, because we were talking before we went live. There were some times where I was like really, really frustrated at people, right? Where I was, hate's a strong word. I literally hate, but that's what we start to feel, where you're like angry, you feel that. And what had to change is I had to start to have compassion that, no, that connects to them for some reason, and I want to know what that is so that I can love them better and give them greater grace in that situation, because that's what I want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you mentioned frustration, and I feel like that is probably one of the best words to describe how I have felt throughout this year as a leader of a church. And it's always been at, the people of our church. It's the situation. It's at, just the overall kind of like how it's affecting us, the disruption of life. All of these things are incredible frustrations. How have you guys managed your frustrations? What frustrated you the most, or if you feel comfortable enough talking about it? I think for me, one of my frustrations, I think, and I don't want to say it's the same that maybe you've had, but Keith, you said this earlier. I think one of the things, and maybe this borderlines frustration and hurt, is the amount of time that I've spent in relationship with people that have been in the church. And I think every pastor I've talked to has dealt with this to some extent, that 10 years, 15 years, close in high level roles, just disappearing in the middle, stepping out, an email, we're leaving the church, things like that. If you even get that. Sometimes found out where people were staying because of, there are people that have left our church that we didn't find out, never once came and had a conversation, no matter what we've done with and for their family, and for whatever reason, I know we're not perfect, but that you find out, they're not going to our church anymore because of a social media post. Hey, we're looking for a church that really does this. I guess we don't do that. You know what I mean? And that's how you're finding out about stuff like this. And I think we're strong men, leaders, and you just move forward. But I think at some point that does affect us. It impacts us. It can impact the way we approach people, the way we want to love people. And so maybe you guys could just speak to how have you processed what you've been deeply frustrated about, if you feel comfortable sharing what some of those frustrations have been, and how are you trying to keep your heart, let's just say it that way, soft toward people, because we're in a people business, and if you're not going to love people, you shouldn't be pastoring.
Sure.
So how are you, like, what are you doing? And maybe you're not, I don't know that I'm there yet. Like, I'm working through these emotions. Let's be real honest.
This is my counseling session right here.
This is our this is why I do this once a week. It's a lot cheaper. But I really think that is a legitimate thing that's going to impact ministry and pastors moving forward. And we have got to figure out how to be able to handle those, how to process them, how to deal with the hurt. So I don't know either one of you guys, but I want to know what you guys are doing and how you guys are processing it.
For me, to address the hurt first, I think a big thing for me has always been, and so it was hard in this season, is when people quit trusting me. That's trust is a big deal.
Yeah.
And like you said, you invest in people's lives, and I don't know if they minimize it, thinking like, oh, it was just a job to us, but it's not. When you're meeting with someone and their marriage is in crisis, you don't just go home and turn that off. I mean, you go home and you still feel that pain for them, and
100%.
you love them, and you're praying for them, and when you're, a loved one passes away and you do the funeral, you don't just do it because it's your job. You do it because you love that family. And honestly, if you didn't know the family beforehand, now you're connected in such a unique way that it just becomes a part of who you are. So when those relationships and when people quit trusting me as a leader, that to use a dramatic phrase, that hurt my feelings. Like that was something that I can minimize it and act like I'm just tough and stuff doesn't bother me, but that wounded me, and that created some insecurity in me, and I was sad. I mean, that was just, if I would say the emotion that I felt most often was sadness versus anger. Mm-hmm. There are things I got angry about, but anger is more like you read someone's post and you're like, that's stupid. But then the next moment, I'm fine. Yeah. The hurt stayed with me. So the things that I did to stay healthy, I went to counseling. I went to Florida for a week.
That's good counseling. I like going to Florida for a week too.
Yeah, and I went to Colorado and took advantage of their drug laws. No, no, but I went to Florida. There was a ministry that just works with pastors, and I actually had it scheduled to do before COVID, so it was already scheduled. But the phrase that I used was, I wasn't in a broken or crisis. Yeah. But I was just sensing my heart was becoming less healthy, and I want to be healthy. And I went there and I processed through and I discussed why things were hurting my feelings, why things were creating that insecurity, and then I came home, and so like when I'm in counseling, I was like, this is great. I feel total freedom. I'm ready to go. And you come right back into it, and you have to remind yourself of those things that you learned and walk through. So in my life, it's the things that you should do. I mean, I'm really consistent in prayer and reading the scriptures and doing the things that actually pour back into me. Like for me, it's hanging out with my wife. Another thing that fills my tank is hanging out with friends. So in this season, it's been really tough because we can't have a ton of people over our house and that kind of stuff. So we have to be strategic about it. But yeah, I think it's just being aware of what condition your heart is in and not allowing it to keep that progression toward negativity. And so yeah, it's been hard.
Yeah. I was, when the NBA bubble was going on, I was listening to some podcasts about how that affected some of the players. Yeah. And I think sometimes we can look at these, genetic anomaly, superhuman athletes and forget that they're people. Yeah. And they were struggling with mental health and being away from their family and the pain. And almost every one of them said, we'll never do that bubble again. It was awful, and how it affected them and the managers of the teams and the coaches. And I say that to say that one of the things I had to do was give myself permission to be human in terms of how I felt about some things, because I wanted to buck up or be angry or be a robot or whatever it was on any side. I don't want anyone to hear any of us saying that the messiness of people is something that we don't think we should deal with. We do. Right. We signed up for that, and we want that. In fact, it is a privilege to be able to step into those messes. Mm-hmm. I think what's hard is we legitimately want to love our people and steward that well, that when we feel like we have failed them or we're trying to get it right or that we've lost their trust, we are people.
Yeah.
And so I've had to step back and ask myself when I've felt those frustration moments, anger moments, what's driving that? Like, what is it a healthy thing? Is it an insecurity? Is it an idol? Is it I don't want the church to get smaller? Like, and I've had to process those and really work through those and then give myself permission to go, you did love those people well, and they did walk away. It's okay that hurts. You know, I heard a person say years ago, be careful that you don't take credit for every person that stays, or you have to take credit for every person that leaves. And so I've really tried to, to manage that. And I really think this comes from, we're frustrated because we want to love people well. We care about the gospel. We want to do that. I also think that it's just hard that in any job, it's true, but in ministry, you have to recognize you're going to give your best to people, and they're going to not think it's good enough.
Yeah.
And that's been on steroids during this entire season. Is you feel like you're trying to survive your own family and your own personal life, and then you're giving your best to people, and people are like, "Yeah, that sucked. That wasn't right," and that's painful. You know, that's hard. And again, we asked for that. We have a great job. We want that, but it really does come from, we love the Lord and we love people, and we want to steward that. I think for me, in the end, I've really had to come back to control what I can control.
Yep.
Stay on mission, stay healthy in my own spiritual walk with the Lord. It sounds trite, but be a good dad, be a good spouse, and then have a hobby. So I played a lot of golf, and I'm really trying to get better at golf. It's something, and I was an athlete my whole life, and golf has been one thing where I feel like I've put time in it to try to get better at, and it's exhausting and frustrating and expensive. And
you don't see the results sometimes.
No, but the golf course has been a weird escape for friendship, for nature, for competition. And it's been something that has been healing. And it sounds weird because I can be just as annoyed on a golf course after hole one. But I think a hobby has been really important, aside from the basic things that we all know.
So to help, to recap what you said. So to help with your frustrations, you took up golf.
I took up a frustration.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Maybe that's why I'm still frustrated.
Let me speak to one thing he said, too, because I realize my communication might be coming across not what I want. The part that was hurtful was the people who left without communication. And I say this at every meeting I have. I am never put off by having a meeting. I don't mind getting into the messiness of life. I don't mind working through conflict. I don't mind being confronted, pushback. Like, that's not the issue. For me, it was just the people who just immediately disconnected. That's what was hard, because you do pour into them, and you just think, don't we have enough relational equity that we could have worked that through? So
I'd rather have people think I'm wrong or an idiot than my character isn't good.
Oh, right.
Right? Like,
but I feel like that's the struggle. I feel like, as you guys were talking about that, I feel like part of the struggle is, with some of these people, it's like, you have been in our church, and a vital part of our church, in all the conversations outside of what we just do on the weekend. It's like, me. Yeah. Like, it feels like that. Yeah. And then it feels like some distance because we're not meeting in person. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to leave to go someplace else, or no place at all. Well, because of decisions that we made. Right. Or because of the whole entire disruption. I think sometimes we probably take more on it. It's probably has to do with all the things that we talked about, where people's spiritual faith is not maybe where they thought it was or where we thought it was, the disruption, all of those things. Maybe they had not been happy before, and it was I feel like this was the perfect time. If you wanted to slip out of a church, you could. Sure. No one would ever know. It's been months. You can just walk out the back door.
But I think to that point, Tim, there is a reality that all of our churches are of a size that we don't know everybody personally. We don't have personal relationships. And so sometimes what we perceive as their connection to us, and even our ministries, is not accurate, right?
Yep.
And this highlighted people's real need for human interaction the whole time. And, it's taught our team the importance of making sure they are relationally connected with people in their ministries.
Yeah.
And me recognizing that they don't know me as well as I might think they know me just because I preach a lot.
Yeah. You said something that shocked me when we were taking a tour of your newest building. You said that you went there live, and I hope I'm not portraying a confidence, but you said something along the lines of like, you expected there to be more excitement, and maybe I'm changing the phraseology, but people were kind of like, oh yeah, you're the guy on the TV.
Yeah.
but their connection was to someone on campus. It was
sure.
to the campus pastor, and you realized that was an eye-opening moment for you. And I think the same thing for all of us. We have to realize that we don't have the relationship all the time that we think we do.
Yeah, and there is a reality that transparency builds trust, relationship builds trust, and they don't have that with us as much as we'd love to think that they do sometimes. And I think if you're listening to this and you're in an organization and you're trying to keep credibility, don't minimize connection. You know, that's one of the fears I have about the potential everybody work from home forever culture is, Tim Kite and others who are leadership gurus talk about connection as one of the critical legs of the stool of leadership. And I get nervous that we're going to try to lead and influence without actually seeing people or connecting with people. And this is, in my mind, highlighted the importance of relationship, not devalued the importance of being in person and knowing people. And so, and it's also just highlighted that we don't have that sometimes as much as we might think we do.
Yeah, let me ask you guys if you experienced this. So before COVID, I was pretty anti work from home. I like a staff culture. Then when it first happened, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see how this works. Like, there's some benefit to this. But that faded quickly for me and our team. And that's what I was surprised about. I thought our team would be like, this is great. I can just wake up and be in my PJs and work from there. And we found that people were like, no, we actually like being in the office. Now, we might have some flexibility when we go back to change it up somewhat. But I think, absolutely see the value of connection as a staff and obviously as a church. But do you guys experience the same thing?
I don't think it's a great alternative. I think we did it. I think a lot of the people on our team, I think there's moments where it can help, but I think I found our overall, not just connection, but I think productivity suffered. Because I think what we do, we collaborate so much in our teams on ministry that they're not just one person's doing this, but it's a department or it's a group of 4 or 5 people that are working together. It's so hard to do that kind of stuff over Zoom. There's so much that's lost. I mean, there's times when it was needed, but I don't think, I don't want to speak for our entire team, but I think most of the people were pretty glad to come back with the obvious concerns of the virus and the risk and all of that. And I think we have that. But I find that we've found people that have either had to quarantine because they happen to be around somebody that, was positive and they're gone. By the time they're toward the end of their quarantine, they're like, please, dear Lord, let me come back. Can I come back to the office? I'll come work at night. I'll do, just get me. I've got to be around people. Like, that's what
this week that had to be quarantined, and he came to me to tell me the news. Like, I had to make the decision, but he's like, I was around someone. I had my mask on. They were positive. Do I have to go home? Like, it was like dread in his face, and I'm like, sorry, bud.
Yep.
You do.
We're still I think it's something we're all gonna keep fighting because the toothpaste is out of the tube, certainly in the corporate world, more than ever for this.
Yeah.
And so people are gonna have to navigate it. I mentioned the word bias earlier. I have a dramatic bias against working from home, and I have a distrust of people's natural proclivity to do that which is productive, and it's a bias, and I have to work through why that is, and it's probably the fact that if I worked from home, I wouldn't get as much done personally. But I think for us, what we clearly saw suffer was our all-staff culture. We have some really critical all-staff meetings that build the team in a common direction spiritually and towards vision. And not having those for several months was just huge. Yeah. And the first time we were able to come back, the amount of staff members who came to me and says, well, that was oxygen. Yeah. Thank you. And we had brought some employees on right before quarantine hit. And I literally grieved that they didn't get to experience our all-staff culture. Yeah. They were back in their houses figuring things out. 2 of them had moved, one from Texas and one from Indiana, and they couldn't even get to see the people in person.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
So that's what one of our guys we brought on that does our video, and he said that. He's like, I just wasn't even thinking about it. He goes, we said, what are you guys looking forward to? And he's like, actually meeting people. Yeah. He had been on staff for a couple of months at that point. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he only knows our staff because he moved from Northern Ohio. So
wow. You just can't accomplish certain things through Zoom, like you said, that you want to. I think we have, because the toothpaste is out of the tube, we have some people that they found they did like it, and we're trying to understand it. And it's interesting. with my executive team right now, I've given them 2 different articles to read about working from home and the projections and what some experts are saying about this, and the long-term way they think is going to affect work culture. I think you could see more people go to 4-day work weeks. I think you could you could see a renaissance of hobbies in a way that could really impact church attendance beyond already what it is. When
that means it's going to get worse for anybody listening. That means it's going to get worse.
In the sense that you could see people having more accessibility to go away Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even than they currently do now. You already saw people. We all know people in our churches that when they realized, oh, I can do my kids' schoolwork away from here, or I can work away from here, we'll go be somewhere else. And so how that could play out with even people outside of our churches and our staff, those are the people that attend our church, could just be really interesting. But it's something we're navigating, but it affected us. It definitely affected us.
We've gotten a bunch of questions online, so I want to make sure we can get to some of them in our conversation. Just in speaking with frustration, someone asked this question. They said, how do you all balance giving people both grace and truth in these times of frustration? How do we balance giving people? I feel like in the role that we're in, we have to give only grace. That's what it feels like. Maybe not you, Matt. You're good at just giving mostly truth.
That's not true.
That's not true.
I'm a liar. I'll give you grace in
that. But I do think that's okay. So now the table's being flipped on the question that's being asked, right? What does it look like for us to give people grace and truth? Which I feel like you kind of said that. I think that's a quick check of our own spirit that we have to do a little bit. But
I think if you can. Yeah, I think it's trying to put yourself in someone's shoes. That is what we have to constantly strive for, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Is to try to understand the why behind their feelings, their emotions, their viewpoint, and to give grace in that, knowing that they're not going to always embrace our perspective, and vice versa. But I think for us, what's hard is all 3 of us are the primary communicators for our church. So what people typically see from us is the truth side, because we're getting up every Sunday and proclaiming the truth. And I think that creates intimidation where people think because we get up and we're so confident in our communication that if they have a meeting with us, that's how it's going to feel. That we're good communicators. Yeah, and we're good arguing. You know, I mean, we have to be in order to teach. And so I think people have nervousness. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I've sat down with people that are physically shaking as they're coming into the, like they got called to the principal, and I'm like, you really need to relax because this is going to be a good meeting, you know. And when I had a meeting this year where I said to the person, they kept like apologizing. I said, you are not offending me, and they said, yes, I am. And I went, you're not. And they go, I don't believe you. And I'm like, okay. But I think they just think because we present the truth on Sunday that we can't give grace and or hear perspectives, and that's the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, you said it, but I think it starts with seek to understand before be understood. Seek to understand before you try to defend. Where are they really coming from? No one's wrong on purpose. They're trying to figure it out
Ask
themselves.
More questions.
So I think it really is remind yourself that you love them. Remind yourself that you have a privilege that they're in front of you, that they would even want to come talk to you. I mean, there's so many people that I think about, they leave my office or they come in my inbox, and I think it's only by God's grace that I have the position that they even care what I'm thinking or doing about this. Yet, I also think that we have a responsibility to do the full work of the ministry and to say what we believe is the truth on something. And at the end of the day, we have to lead. We can't ready, aim forever. We got to pull the trigger at some point. And so in those conversations, I think you try to understand, but I believe in the principle of it's better to be clear than it is to always be correct, because you're never always going to be correct. So tell them what's going on, how you got there. But I do think making sure you do your best to value their opinion, their faithfulness, their loyalty at the beginning and through the conversation, and not to make that artificial. It's true. You know, you do feel that way about them.
I think that I speak for myself and our staff, and I think you guys, I think we actually are really good at giving people grace and truth. I would assume you guys are as well. I think a lot of the frustrations, and so maybe it's just my misunderstanding of the way the question's worded, I think a lot of our frustrations are the fact that we don't even have an opportunity to hear why somebody feels like they need to leave and go someplace. That's the frustration. The frustration is that people don't give an opportunity for us to go, tell me why you feel that way. I know we've had several staff have conversations with people that struggled through the summer with the civil rights movement and some of the things that we said, really trying to uphold, whether, and again, I don't know how it's become two sides, but I understand that uphold, whether it's police officers and people of color, uphold where we just value, and so, we've had people like, we're leaving, and then sometimes there's been conversations had, with staff members with them, and they come back to a sense of, oh, I understand why you feel that way. You know what I mean? And this is what we're actually trying to say. And so I feel like the real frustrations have been we don't even have an opportunity to express grace, and or speak truth in those situations. That to me has been the greatest frustration that I have felt, not in conversations with people.
I think sometimes people confuse, I didn't agree with you, or I told you something you don't like, therefore you weren't being gracious.
Right.
Like my teenage son sometimes says, Dad, you're not being kind. No, you're wrong.
Yeah. I can show you what it's like if I'm not kind.
Right, so there's a reality that, sometimes we're saying what we're saying that's not being perceived as gracious. And it's because we believe that the convictions from the scriptures or our leadership convictions, this is right. And that doesn't mean I'm not being gracious. I actually think I'm being gracious by leading you to the thing that I think is right.
Yeah,
that's good.
I had a conversation where a gentleman said, basically, that he didn't agree with me and wanted me to take his side, and I said, but I don't agree with you. So how can I do that? And he really wrestled with it of thinking, well, but I want you to agree with me, and I'm like, but I don't. So what should I do? And he was like, I guess you can't say that then. It was like he was like the first time he'd ever considered that, and I'm like, yeah, but I think that's part of it is people think because they believe something, we have to believe it too.
That's good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions about what's ahead that actually came in. There were some, I'll just give you a few of them, and maybe we can just kind of in conversation just hit all of them. One question was asked, what does online ministry for your churches look like in the future? Another one was, what is your biggest concern for the church moving forward? Again, those aren't the same, but they're all kind of focused on what's ahead. Someone said, all of you spoke about the gap in spiritual depth that 2020 highlighted in people. What does spiritual growth maturity look like in the church in a post-COVID-19 world? And what will
topics, Tim.
No, they're not. They're all about the future. And what will be different about your preaching because of a season like this? So, just speaking to kind of what's ahead, just for sake of time. I don't want to keep you guys here for 4 hours. I want to respect your time. But what do you guys see for the church ahead? And when we'll tag that with, add to that one, what about online ministry? So
before we talk maybe about the specifics of some of the church world, we talked before we went live about, we think one of the continued challenges that's going to exist, that's going to be divisive in the church world and beyond, is the vaccine. We just feel like whether it's even on our own staff teams or in our churches, and the way culture is going to talk about that, everybody's going to plant their flag in a way that's going to be really complicated. And so finding discernment. There's already, so I saw a video of a doctor put out this long rant of just all the things that he had submitted and said was wrong about the way Pfizer, biotech, Moderna, all of them were going about this new vaccines, and just expressed all of these concerns. They're skipping all this in the process. There's been no animal trials in this. There's been none of these things. The impact of this is going to be worse than the disease. I watched that video. Somebody else I follow, they have a bias.
They have a bias. There's another, I follow an epidemiologist online who just goes on there to answer questions. They're working for a COVID tracking unit. This is their entire world doing it. And literally someone asked them that question, and they posted an article and said that these things are false. Most of these things, like just referring to, for example, they said that these companies actually did animal trials alongside of 70,000 human trials. The reason
doesn't
why
even
it's
matter,
been
though.
sped
That's what-
up is because they
Yeah.
did them in conjunction with the human trials for sake of time. So I'm just saying, my
that's
point
what Keith
is,
was talking
there's
about
so much
earlier.
misinformation that is out there that all it does is create more of a divide when it comes to this. I'm not saying that you should get the vaccine or not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it feeds into the environment that we have today where we are going to see this as a huge divide.
No, so that's what Keith was saying earlier, though, that we don't even have facts that we can use as a starting point. People,
There's no baseline.
If you give, people will say that they'll go, "Give me evidence for that opinion."
Yeah.
You give them evidence, and they dismiss it as biased, or there was, it was not true, or whatever it might be. And so it's really hard to even take a stance on anything nowadays because people can dismiss it quickly.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to point
Yeah,
out
I
why
think-
the vaccine thing is going to be a big deal.
I think that's going to be a real challenge, and I think it's
Yeah.
going to create division, and it's going to affect the future of the church in the next 6 months in terms of, do people feel safe to come back into buildings and large gatherings? How are they orienting their schedules, their time, all those things? And I think there's going to be real challenges of you're recruiting a volunteer, and the volunteer says, "Hey, do you know if that team's high vaccinated, not vaccinated?"
Yeah.
Right,
And
yeah.
so I think there's just going to be
Like background checks?
Yeah,
There-
I
can we
think
do
there's
the
going to be.
vaccination
I think there's
checks?
going to be real challenges in terms of how people feel about that, in the same way that masks and open or closed did. And there's this idea again of right, wrong, biblical truth. What does it mean to be a civilian and a Christian at the
Yeah.
same time? And
Yeah.
it's all going to just be highlighted, and
Yeah.
it's clear that we're going to be told a narrative. I think in some ways the future of the church has the opportunity to be bright, because I think that COVID has highlighted some of our weaknesses, sort of the church universal about discipleship,
Yep.
about the
Agreed.
ability to navigate relationship. I think it's highlighted that our people aren't as trained for evangelism as they are to invite someone to church. And
Yeah.
so how do we navigate that? And I'm all for inviting people to church, but
Yeah.
of course, but
Right.
how does that look? I think in some ways, COVID has called the bluff of whether or not people are Christians. It's
Yep.
been purifying
Yeah.
in terms of what
Pruning.
they're committed to, pruning to what that is. So I think in some senses, as people regather, large mass, convene, you have a chance to launch with some energy around healthier people, maybe, even though, because I think the people that are going to be there want to be there, excited about there. But I do think it's going to force all of us to really cross our T's and dot our I's of what evangelism and discipleship looks like beyond what we've been doing. And we're going to live in a world that's more seamlessly digital and in person. We're going
Yeah.
to go from meetings like this to a Zoom meeting, back to an in-person meeting,
Yeah.
back to a Zoom
Yeah.
meeting.
That's it.
And everybody's going to live in that world. Kids are going to learn in school and in person,
Yeah.
in Zoom and in person. And
Yeah.
so that's going to be super different.
What do you see for the future of the church?
The future of the church is bright.
Yeah.
I mean that with all sincerity. I think what Keith just said about, and you were mentioning too, the pruning and calling the bluff. What it's done is, I think the people who are really bought in our churches are there,
Yeah.
and they're invested. So, we were talking about earlier the fact that our churches haven't just survived in this season, but in many ways are thriving in other areas. Now, none of us have any idea what our attendance really is. That used to kind of be our marker,
right.
but we have other markers that we're looking at now going, there's a lot of health. Giving has been good. People connecting, people coming and serving. The reason I'm saying all that is, like, for us, so this is a weird logic. Follow me for a second. When I first became lead pastor, it was after a church split. We had our whole situation. I don't want to go into all that. But the people who stayed, when I became pastor, there was like about 375. They were 100% bought in. So my wife and I were just at dinner last night talking about that season. They were so bought in. It was like starting a church with 375 amazing people. I think as we come out of this season, we're going to have the same opportunity.
Yeah.
The people that are there, they've navigated this difficult season with you. If we are ready for the next season to give the vision of what God's calling us to do, I think you're going to see a ton of momentum. And I'm honestly really excited, because I think we've seen who is healthy, who's unhealthy.
Yeah.
I think it's exposed it to them so that they can take the necessary steps. I 100% agree. Our people are not equipped to evangelize, so we have to change how we're discipling. So I know for us, I'll just speak for our church. Behind the scenes, our staff have never been healthier, have never been more focused.
Yeah.
And the weaknesses in our church have been exposed, and we're thankful for that, because we can now be strategic in that. So I think the future of the church is really bright.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to add for clarity, I would want to make sure people at Grace know this. I know that for some people, the way they feel that they're with us in this season is that they are meeting with us online.
Yeah.
And I'm more than comfortable with that,
100%,
right?
100%.
I'm more than comfortable with the people that for whatever reasons, medical reasons, reality, age, want to do that. And I'm super supportive of that. I think what that's revealed, though, is those people are actually still with us online.
Yeah.
They're still dialed in. They're still connected. They're still figuring out what's going on. They're still giving. They're still in part of a group, whether it's a Zoom group or whatever it is. I think what it has done is it's expedited the 5 times a year people that came to your church have just exited. And there's a reality of one of the teachings in Scripture that's kept me sane is the parable of the soils. And 3 of the soils look good, but only one of them is good, and one of them doesn't look good at all. This is expedited and accelerated some of that soil of people that sprung up and were excited, and it's purified it. It's shown it away. But I think again, when everyone feels safe and wants to come back, and however that gets into it, which the definition of safety and risk right now is another side podcast. But I do think there's an opportunity for people to more than ever be energized to go and to be on mission. And I think it's given us as a church. I remember sitting in my basement working one day feeling grieved that I didn't have confidence that my people would be able to be evangelistic in this season, and feeling the burden of that from our leadership that we haven't done a good job of equipping them with that. And so I think it's given us our marching orders to get better.
I would agree. I think I agree with both of you guys. So I don't want to just restate it, but I think that anytime you go through something like this, you'll feel change. Things will change in the church, but God always uses them to really move the church to be more like what He wants it to be. Yeah. So I think these are sometimes purifying seasons that happen in the church, and I think that I've looked at someone asked about the online. I think technology will enable us to reach people in a different way than we've ever done before. I think these are some of the things that we've seen. People will embrace it. To what extent and what that looks like, that's still up for grabs. But I think what it highlighted for me, in our church, was the understanding that it highlighted how many people I think really depend on the church for their spirituality rather than a real personal connection with Jesus. And so we were already moving in a direction of bringing some drastic change to how we do discipleship in our church. Yeah. That's advancing in 21. It just highlighted it. We already think we were moving in that direction. There are things that we feel like we want to be able to really help lead people toward that will be, it would just create more stability. It's kind of like Jesus, at the end of the parable of the Sermon on the Mount, and the parable he gives about the foundation. Sure. I feel like it exposed what was the foundation for a lot of people in this year in our churches. And so I think we talked about.
I'll say online is here to stay for us. That was a common question we get is, even when all this ends, can we keep online? Absolutely. I think I was resistant to it because my fear was people would do that instead of come in the physical. But I think it's, to say what Keith said earlier, it's going to be an and versus an or. I think sometimes they're going to watch online and many times they're going to come. But we had, this is not an exaggeration, we had people get saved. The first experience online during this, become discipled in that process, engage in Bible studies, get in small groups, virtual, never set foot in our church, and walk through that process. And then we baptized a couple of them last week. Yep. And we had a situation of a person who doesn't even live in our city that was on the process to get divorced and now reconciled with her spouse. And just because one of our members shared the sermon, she watched it and went back and started watching some of my series on marriage, and it saved their marriage.
That's awesome.
When you see that, and I'm sure we all could give testimonies of that, once you see the value of it again or reminded of it, you just know you'll never go away from that. So cool. Online's here to stay.
Same thing with you guys.
And it's here to stay. We've built some things around it. We also understand the limitations of it. I get concerned when people act like it's the magic bullet, the silver bullet to go forward. It's not. I would stand by. I think people would rather be at concert. I think people would rather see Hamilton in person than watch Hamilton on Disney Plus.
Right.
And so I still think there is a connection of what goes on. I think about my own 6-year-olds. Our church was doing the best job they could to provide material to disciple our children outside of our family. But my children wanted to be present. And the moment we opened back up spiritually and engaged, there was something that was better for them than us trying to wrangle them in the living room.
Yeah.
Sit down, Cooper, sit down, Candy, get after it. When they
You mean other people are way better at teaching your kids
Well,
stuff than maybe? I'll own that.
I would say other people are certainly, there are certain environments that are just better for the kids to be in.
Sure,
there's a reason I'm not their school teacher.
Yeah.
My wife and I through the spring were like, this is why we don't homeschool.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not that anyone shouldn't, but that's why we don't. And while I feel responsible to disciple my children, they need an environment and the material they could engage in person. So I think online's here to stay. There's things we're going to do with it. We're building things around it. Our team's done a great job. But I also think the moment we can pack a room out with a worship night, people will long for that, and be excited about that. And but it is going to be, more people will navigate their 1.8 times a month that they come may move to 1.4 times a month that they come, and part of that 0.4 is filled in with online.
Very possible.
We just have to navigate that.
I think I agree that online, something we've been doing for years, but we invested more into it just because we see the benefits for the kingdom, not necessarily always for in our building or church. But what's interesting is through this whole entire year where I felt like early and everybody was doing remote, like we talked about, that there's almost this, and when it comes to corporate world, there's this, renaissance of we don't need buildings anymore. We can all do remote. I feel like that this year has highlighted how important our spaces are for people to gather, and how I think we need it. I think it's just really critical. But there's a couple other questions, and we'll wrap up with this. But someone asked, what is each of your Enneagram types, and how have those behaviors come to light?
I'm not touching that.
I'll do Matt's for you. He's already said that. You're an Enneagram 8. I know that because I know you pretty well. And you already said something earlier. You're like, if I hear or people do something, I just go straight to them. They're shocked. I call them. That's what an 8 would do. They would run into the fire. And they would go, if somebody's got a problem with me, I'm going to call them. We're going to have a meeting. We're going to sit down and we're going to find out exactly why.
Yeah.
That's pretty an accurate assessment. You're an Enneagram 8.
Yeah, I'd like to take things head on, but I would say I'm a healthy 8.
You are.
So I know that
you
sounds
are.
self-serving,
There's a big
but
difference.
Yeah, I'm not an unhealthy. So I want to take things head on so that we can resolve, because I really do love people and I want to resolve it. So yeah, and that's the only way I know how to view the world. When we did the Enneagram test with our staff, this sounds so dumb. Like, it makes me sound so simple. I always assumed everyone was an 8, but they were just choosing not to be an 8. Like, they know
that
the
is
right
8.
thing to do.
That is so 8 of you.
And but
they weren't confident enough to be an 8.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, if I just teach them enough, we'll all be 8s. And then what was funny was my entire staff.
You pretty much only hire 8s, I thought.
That's not true. I only have 3 on staff, 2 or 3 on staff. But my entire staff had taken that test, and I was on vacation or something. And when I came back, they said, you have to take this test, but we know you're an 8. That's what they said. So I was like, okay, but I don't know.
What about you? What's yours?
Also an 8.
You're an 8 as well?
An 8. And I would say that one of the things I've learned is when I'm in an unhealthy place, is what I do is I go to escapism and I hide and I pout. So this has had moments where when I'm mad or sad or angry, or sometimes I'll say to my executive pastor, I'll just forget the staff. I'm going to sit in my office and write a talk. I'm done with them. And he'll sort of lovingly say, like, you can't do that. And the same thing at home when I'm pouty and, So, but I'm an 8, and I think I'm healthier as an 8 than I was years ago. And I hope by God's grace I'll be healthier. But what I've also learned is when I'm in a very stress-free environment, like vacation, I turn into this 2. I turn into like the helper guy. Of how can I make it fun? And
me too. Yeah.
So it's very.
Is that where you guys go in growth? They say when it's not stress in growth.
Yeah.
So in the Enneagram, you can go one of 2 directions. I think, one stress, one in growth. I didn't know.
The wing I think I go to is probably a 7 of like enjoying
fun,
life. But when I'm at this really healthy place, I'm the. Let me go down and get everybody the table, and what do you want to eat, and I'll take care. Like I go to fun guy, and not just fun guy, but helper guy.
Yeah.
So I've also seen that if I'm not there for a while, I must be in a lot of stress.
That's, yeah.
And I've learned that for me, that when I start to function in low grade agitation with like every human being on the planet, like no one knows how to drive, no one knows how to take an order, no one knows how to do anything at all, whether it's my kids or a stranger. Like, I'm just in a mood, and it's on me, and I need to take a nap or eat a Snickers.
That's funny.
Yeah, my wife is so wonderful this way that when I start pulling away, and she can sense it, not necessarily with her, just like in life, she's the one that she comes and meets me there and helps refill that tank. You know what I mean? And like, it's one of those things. It's such a gift from God to have, but it's also it's like having a mirror in front of you where she's exposing like you need a Snickers.
Yeah,
you know what I
you're
mean?
broken, buddy.
Yeah, that's funny.
You a 3?
Yeah, I'm a 3. I'm an Enneagram 3, and so I think 3's an achiever. And so, I think this kind of year, the way it comes out is you feel a sense of hopelessness because all of the plans and all the things that you were going to do just are
It's
gone.
hard to make anything go up.
They're just gone. Like, we've lost it all. And so that can be kind of demoralizing as a 3.
Let me speak something about you, Tim, though. What's funny is you've talked...
Well, we're out of time. So, hey, thank you all for...
No, this is a compliment.
Oh, okay.
This is a compliment. You want this.
I wasn't sure.
This is the honest truth. I've been around you in some of the most stressful moments of your ministry ever, and you are still like the most optimistic, kind person, to the point where like I'll go home and Mary's like, "How's Tim doing?" And I'm like, "Good." Like, I'm surprised, like, because I think you and I, when this thing happened, and we knew you were the whole church and all that. Like, we both talked about this before we went live. Like, we prayed for you. We were like, "Oh my goodness,
that.
I can't imagine." But then I'd be around you, and you're like, "Yeah, it's going to work out. It's going to get." I'm like, man, you're a different number than I am.
His faith grows my faith.
Oh,
there are a lot of times where he has way bigger faith than I do with the way he sees things. And there are times where I'm like,
it's either faith or stupidity.
Is Tim dumb or not?
Yes. I don't know. I'll let you know this year. I will let you know this year. I think I can feel that way because I've learned to completely disassociate myself from any feelings whatsoever. Yeah. So that's why I just move forward. So that's how I am as a 3. And there was a bunch of questions, believe it or not. We'll just do this as the last question. And we could probably talk for hours because we could just go on forever. But this actually came up several times. People want to know what the Starbucks order is.
I hate coffee. I hate the smell of coffee, the taste of coffee.
Amen. Preach it, brother. I'm
totally
with you.
I have a caramel apple spice. So it's basically just
apple juice with caramel
in it. Yeah, and it's wonderful.
I happened to get, for the very first time, the exact same order. I changed my order.
Did you like it?
Yeah, it was good. I changed my order when you gave me the order. But normally, if I'm going to get something hot from Starbucks, it's a white hot chocolate mocha. But I don't love coffee either. Yeah, I never drank it. So that was like, I didn't know they had those. So you taught me something. So
you evangelized it.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. What about you?
I'm like the most basic high school girl suburbanite.
You're a order. I don't even want to. You want to say that? Vanilla latte. He said vanilla latte with almond milk with an extra shot.
No, I did not say that. But a grande vanilla latte. Like I am about as basic and suburban as you can be.
Yes, you are. Hey, guys, I appreciate not just this time, but I appreciate you guys. Just the friendship has been meaningful for me, especially in the season that we've been in. It's just to know that you guys are praying for me and praying for us. That's been so encouraging. I have a staff members yelling at me, "Why would you drink a caramel apple spice?" Now we need some coffee, people. But it's been a lot of fun. Thank you for I feel like you guys have so much wisdom. I look up to you guys when it comes to leadership and wisdom. I have personally gone and sat down and had lunches with you guys individually because I don't know what to do along the way in ministry. And so I want you guys to know that. I appreciate the heck out of you. Love you guys.
And I do the same thing with you guys. I mean, there are times, all of us are in different seasons of ministry. And I mean, there are times, Keith can attest, I'll text him and say, "Hey, I got a situation. I have no idea." Same thing. "Hey, how would you handle this situation?" And it really has been, I think, one of the biggest blessings in this season of uncertainty has been our relationship because we're the lead pastors. We can't always even depend on our staff. Not that they're not dependable, but we're the leaders of the staff. Yeah. That at times you have to have someone else that's in that role, and it's invaluable to be able to text you guys and say, "What would you do?" And when I get advice from you guys, it becomes action. I trust your guys' wisdom.
Yeah, it's mutual. I feel like we're at the Emmys, and it's a mutual admiration society right now. But I think there is a point, though, that I would encourage people who are listening that sometimes pastors, not all pastors, but I think pastors can do a good job of finding other people like we have that can encourage each other. But no matter what you do for a living, do that. Like, I'm always amazed in how many people work in an industry or a job and they don't go find other people who do that to do like Urban Meyer would go find other great coaches and talk to them and spend time with them, which is why he's great.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Yeah, I'll stop.
I'm sorry, Michigan fan.
Yeah, I know. Hey, we won this week.
Yeah, you did. By the way, that was the only way you would win.
Come on now. Hold on. I've lived here for 16 years. That's our second victory.
Yeah, it is. Except I heard there's a chance, I don't know if this is going to happen, that Ohio State may play Michigan next week. If they don't let them play in the Big Ten.
90 points. The only good of that would be that our coach could
get fired.
That
would be the greatest thing that would happen for you guys.
So I just think people need to take advantage of that, because there's a reason we all are encouraged by each other, because we need each other, and other people in other jobs need that. And I think sometimes people don't take advantage of that opportunity. And I've learned from other great leaders, they do that well.
Yeah,
I think it's important.
That's awesome. So, well, thank you guys so much. Hey, thank you so much for coming out. And just want to say, as we wrap up here today, that as always, we love your feedback. So if you did not agree with any of the things that these two guys said, not me, but any of they said, or you just have comments or things, we would love to hear from you. You can always send an email into podcast@thex.church. And as always, we'd love for you to be able to share these with friends and family, like, subscribe, whatever platform you're on. Again, thank you guys so much. I love you both, and I just pray God's blessing over you guys' church. Anyways, God bless you guys.